If we are one, then the observer within us is not passive, but profoundly creative, shaping our experience not by force, but by awareness itself. In our previous episode, we explored the shift from 3D to 5D awareness, the moment from identification with form into alignment with higher consciousness. But that shift isn't just conceptual. It asks something of us. So in this episode, we're going to explore the power of that inner witness, the part of you that can step beyond reaction, beyond identity, and into discernment and presence. Because embodiment is where this power becomes real. It's not enough to understand the observer intellectually. We are here to live it, to anchor it into the body, into breath, into moment-to-moment experience. As we practice this, we begin to shift from being unconsciously driven by life to consciously participating in it. And in that shift, something remarkable happens. We remember that awareness itself is the doorway to transformation. Hi, I'm Darrell T. Johnson, a musician, a teacher, and a QHHT hypnosis practitioner. I'd like to welcome all of you to episode 30 of If We Are One. Hello, and welcome back for this episode. Today, we are going to talk about the power of the observer and how to practice embodiment in order to gain full awareness and mastery in our present life journey. When we speak about being the observer, we're not just speaking of it as a spiritual metaphor. It actually lines up surprisingly well with how both neuroscience and quantum physics starts to describe experience itself. When you move from 3D awareness to 5D awareness, the key shift is identity. For example, in 3D, I am inside the experience. In 5D, I am aware of the experience. Now that may sound simple, but in fact, it's everything. In 3D consciousness, you're entangled with cause and effect, emotions, events, reactions. They define you. You're in the movie, but reacting as if it's ultimate reality. In observer consciousness, you're still in the movie, but you know that it's a movie. You know you're watching it. That doesn't make the experience meaningless. It actually gives you more agency, not less. You're no longer unconsciously scripted, no longer caught up in mimic coding. You're able to step back in the moment and observe that this is an opportunity for growth, for enlightenment, not necessarily a burden to overcome. Remember the Star Trek holodeck analogy that I gave in the last episode? The awakened participant still feels, acts, and engages, but with awareness that the environment is a constructed hologram, a constructed illusion. So when we're being the observer, we're practicing embodiment, not escape. Here's the nuance a lot of people miss. Being the observer is not dissociation. It is not nothing matters. This is all fake, so I disengage. It is actually, this is real as an experience, but not ultimate as identity. Embodiment then becomes fully feeling without being trapped, fully acting without being defined, fully present without losing awareness of the larger field. So the power of the observer is not detachment, it's lucidity within participation. But what about how you respond to how people who are all in with thinking the illusion is real act during daily interactions? Being the observer is powerful in solitude, but life rarely stays that quiet. How do you hold that spacious awareness when those closest to you, family, friends, even strangers, are fully caught in the illusion, chasing what they believe is real? When their urgency, anger, or demands pull at you, testing your embodiment. It's a real challenge to stay centered, to stay present, and not fall into the emotional morass of the moment. So let me share a story that I believe will illustrate an aspirational level of embodiment and presence. It's about the Buddha and speaks directly to this. In this parable, a restless businessman came to where Buddha and some of his students were meditating. He walked straight up to Buddha and spat on him. The man was furious at his children, who he felt could have been spending their time earning money, but instead were just sitting quietly with Buddha in meditation. But Buddha, instead of getting angry, merely smiled at the man. And that smile was so very disarming to the man that he walked away in a huff, kind of shocked at the reaction that Buddha gave him. The next day, that man came back to Buddha, fell at his feet and said, "Please forgive me. I didn't know what I did." But Buddha actually said, "No, I cannot excuse you." Everyone looked at him kind of in shock because they didn't expect that response. But then Buddha went on to say, "Why should I forgive you when you have done nothing wrong?" The businessman reminded him of what he had done the previous day, spitting on him. And Buddha's statement was, "Oh, that person's not here now. If I ever meet that person, the one you spat on, I'll tell him to excuse you. But to this person, you've done nothing wrong." So basically, Buddha stayed in the here and now, didn't give any more energy to what had been done. And his initial response when it happened was amazement. Buddha was the observer in his own assault. So the Buddha simply smiled, wiped his face, and said, "I cannot control what you do, but I can control how I respond." That moment reveals the heart of living as the observer. No matter how fiercely others cling to the illusion, your power lies in meeting their unconsciousness with unshakable presence, not by changing them, but by remaining rooted in your own truth. From this place, you become the quiet invitation for their awakening. So ponder that one for a while. I know that this level of embodiment is sometimes easier said than done. But again, please ponder this aspirational archetype and see how you can incorporate it into your own life, your own truth. Now, I want to talk more about this embodiment because it takes on a number of nuanced challenges. Remember, embodiment is when the observer is no longer a distant witness, but a conscious presence that is rooted in the felt reality of the body. Within this context, being the observer usually means noticing thoughts, feelings, and reactions without immediately identifying with them. Embodiment adds the missing piece. The observer also pays attention to what is happening in the body while those thoughts and feelings arise, such as tightness, expansion, warmth, pressure, or calm. In that sense, embodiment is not detachment from the body, but deeper contact with it. Now, having said this, it is important to be mindful of balance. Now, what do I mean by this? Balance means to remember that you are not only the body, while also not using that truth to abandon the body. In other words, real spiritual understanding tends to be transcendent and embodied at the same time. You know yourself as more than the physical form, yet you still honor the body as the living place where consciousness expresses itself. A helpful way to frame it is this: disembodiment becomes healthy when it means non-identification, and unhealthy when it becomes dissociation. Non-identification says, I am not limited to my body, while dissociation says, my body and feelings are not really part of my experience, which many sources warn can weaken full spiritual integration. Now, here are two distinctions that one should be aware of. Within healthy spiritual distance, you could say, I am the observer, and I can witness my body, emotions, and thoughts without being consumed by them. But unhealthy disembodiment might sound something like, I rise above the body, so I no longer need to feel, ground, or listen to it. That difference matters because disembodiment is indeed a legitimate source of awareness, not an obstacle to it. Detachment, in that sense, is not escaping experience. It is loosening attachment to it. Now, having said all of this, there is one more aspect that I believe is important to bring to the floor. As I mentioned before, sometimes people get woefully out of balance with their bodies. They become either too fixated on it or allow it to take charge, becoming their own prison. Reconciling this comes down to shifting your relationship with the body from identification to stewardship. When people are enslaved by their bodies, whether through obsession, neglect, or rigid control, it is usually because they have forgotten that the body is a vehicle, not the driver. There needs to be a shift in perspective here. You can think of the difference this way. From the slave-obsessed perspective, I am this body, so its appearance, desires, and demands define who I am and dictate my worth. From the master-steward perspective, I am the conscious presence inhabiting this body. The body is my home, my instrument, and my partner in this human experience. When you view the body as an instrument, the goal of taking care shifts. You don't exercise or eat to feed an ego or conform to an image. You do it to keep the instrument tuned, functional, and available for the work your spirit wants to do. A practical way to reconcile this is move away from how does my body look to others to how does my body allow me to participate in life. This is often called body neutrality, and it's a very powerful antidote to body obsession. The body has biological needs, but those needs should serve your higher intentions. You aren't avoiding hunger, but you aren't controlled by every craving or aesthetic urge either. Obsession is often a form of self-attack, masquerading as self-care. True stewardship is about listening to the body's wisdom, not its demands, and treating it with the care you would give a trusted friend or a valuable tool. You see, we are not the masters of our bodies if we are enslaved by their image, nor are we masters if we abandon their needs. True mastery is the middle path, treating the body with the reverence of a temple and the practical care of an instrument, knowing it is the vehicle through which our consciousness experiences the world, but not the source of our identity. This is a very important thing to be aware of, and is very common as far as growing pains on the spiritual path. Many people find that as their awareness expands, the contrast between their newfound consciousness and their old habitual patterns of body relation becomes sharper and more uncomfortable. The paradox is it is common to feel frustrated because the conscious self can now see the dysfunction, yet the physical self is still running on old automatic programming. This discomfort is actually a sign of progress, though. It means you are no longer blindly asleep in those habits. You have moved from unconscious enslavement to conscious struggle. Congratulations. Which is the necessary bridge to true embodiment. Understand this. You are not failing your spiritual practice because you are still navigating the needs and habits of the body. You are succeeding in your spiritual practice because you are finally becoming conscious enough to witness that relationship. And that awareness is exactly what allows you to choose a new way of being. So don't be so hard on yourself. And through conscious embodiment, see that you are moving ever closer to your goal. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't also speak about those who have physical challenges. For those with physical handicaps or chronic illness, the path isn't about perfecting the body, but transcending through it, using limitation as the ultimate teacher of presence. The truth is, the body doesn't need to be strong, pain-free, or conventionally capable to be a worthy vessel for consciousness. Embodiment here means meeting whatever the body offers. Pain, fatigue, stiffness, with the same observer awareness. Full presence without resistance or story. Living this way in grace isn't denial of the struggle, but a conscious choice to inhabit it fully, which makes those who embody this challenge a living testament to spiritual maturity. Illness or handicap strips away illusions of control, forcing the question, who am I without this body's full function? The answer, that eternal awareness becomes more real, not less. Grace is the metric. True mastery isn't measured by physical prowess, but by equanimity. Don't be enslaved by your body's betrayal, because your identity rests in the observer, not the symptoms. Also, spiritual depth doesn't require a healthy body any more than it requires wealth or beauty. The soul expresses equally through all forms. This path may even be more potent for its raw honesty. Here's the last thing I'm going to say about it. And I feel very deeply about this. When the body falters through illness, injury, or age, embodiment doesn't demand healing or perfection. It asks only that you remain the conscious inhabitant, meeting pain or limitation with the same loving awareness you'd bring to joy or strength. I have a very close loved one, struggling through great physical challenge, but embodying it with grace every day. Not in spite of the body, but through it. Showing and revealing daily that we are never the condition, only the light that witnesses it. This person is my hero. So, let's come back to the power of the observer. The concept of spiritual awareness as the observer is not new. In the Gnostic frame, consciousness is treated as the root of perception rather than the side effect of the body or mind. One source puts it plainly: consciousness is distinct from thoughts, emotions, and the physical body, yet it is what allows us to perceive them. Also, Gnostic teachings describe gnosis as awakening consciousness and coming into direct knowledge of its source, which fits with emphasis on waking up from identification with the illusion. Now, in the Buddhist tradition, Buddhist language often gets even closer to the observer construct, especially in teachings on interbeing, non-self, and the relationship between subject and object. One Buddhist text states that the seer does not exist separate from the seen, and that subject and object arise together from consciousness. This is useful because it supports the idea that the observer is not a detached ego standing outside reality, but a deeper awareness in which experience appears. In modern Buddhist explanations, this also becomes a practice of seeing through the illusion of solid, separate I. Neville Goddard offers a modern mystical version of the same basic insight. Inner state shapes outer experience. His teaching emphasizes imagination, feeling, and the power of awareness as the basis of manifestation, with reality reflecting the state one inhabits. That does not prove things in a scientific sense, but it does provide a strong philosophical relationship to it. So let's talk about the concept of the observer from a scientific perspective, because this is where it gets exciting and a little mind-bending. Have you ever heard of the double slit experiment? It's quantum physics' way of saying reality needs an observer. Here's how it works. You shoot electrons at a barrier with two slits. No one watches which path they take. The assumption is that they will form two distinct patterns when striking the screen that is behind the slits. But something quite unusual happens. Instead of two distinct slit patterns on the screen, the electrons themselves act like waves, spreading out, creating this beautiful interference pattern of pure potential. So, what do the scientists do to capture this action? They put a detector there to observe, just to see which slit they go through. And boom, something quite mind-blowing happens. The waves instead collapse into particles, hitting the screen in two solid bands. Now you're probably wondering, why didn't the particles create the wave pattern like before? Well, the answer is because the particles were being observed. The sheer act of observation changes the outcome of the electron's potential from waves into particles, which was the initial hypothesis anyway. When there was no observer, you got waves. When there was an observer, you got particles. So, does that mean that my thoughts are zapping electrons across the universe? No, that's not the claim. Physics is clear that measurement, not magic mind power, does the collapsing. But here's what it proves. At reality's foundation, things stay wavy or in wave form and probabilistic, infinite probability, until it is observed. Observation selects the outcome. Does this in any way sound familiar? Your life does the same thing also. Unobserved, fear energy just washes over you in waves, chaotic, hard to pin down. But step into the observer position and it collapses into something you can navigate. Not gone, but clarified. You control the impact that it has on you. So to recap, when particles, like electrons or photons, are not observed, they behave like waves, spread out, probabilistic, not localized. But when they are observed, measured, they behave like particles, localized, choosing a specific position. In its simplest terms, observation changes how reality behaves. Even more provocative, it's not just physical interaction, it's the availability of information, measurement or observation, that collapses the wave into a definite state. Now, to stay intellectually honest, physics does not definitively say human consciousness creates reality, but it does show that reality at its base level is not fixed until observed or measured. Potential exists as a field of probabilities, and something about observation selects the outcome. This opens the philosophical door wide open, because now we can reasonably explore: is consciousness fundamental? Is reality participatory rather than purely objective? Is the observer role built into the structure of existence itself? Well, the short answer is yes. Where the observer becomes powerful is in how you translate that into lived experience. We're not saying I am personally collapsing quantum waves into my mind. We're pointing to awareness is primary to how reality is experienced. In a practical sense, when you identify as the character, reality feels fixed, reactive, and heavy. But when you identify as the observer, reality becomes fluid, responsive, navigable. This is the real shift people can feel, not just theorize about. So, reality behaves differently when observed. That's the double slit. Human experience behaves differently when consciously observed. Therefore, the quality of your awareness changes the nature of your reality. Therefore, the power isn't in escaping the illusion. The power is in knowing you're in it and choosing how you show up within it. And let us not forget this important aspect. From a spiritual perspective, you create your reality by virtue of what you think and what you believe. So how do we practice the power of the observer right now? Especially when it feels like non-stop bombardment from those negative forces trying to keep everyone locked in the illusion. Well, you need tools. Simple daily ways to stay present. Hold the observer seat and get the most out of it without getting dragged into the drama. Start with this one. It's one of my favorites. It's called 999 breath anchor. If you can, do it 3 times a day, once in the morning, once midday, and before bed. Here's how it goes. You breathe in for a count of 9, feeling your feet on the ground, naming one physical sensation, cool floor, steady breath. Hold for 9, noticing any thoughts or emotions bubbling up. Label it gently: fear energy, anxiety, anger, sadness. Then exhale for 9 with a light smile and say inside, observed, not me. Boom. That's your stepping back into the awareness seat. Here's another one. In the heat of the moment, when drama pulls at you, use the holodeck exit line. Pause. Touch something solid like your desk or your arm and say quietly, holodeck event, observer present. Then ask yourself, what does the observer see here? Not how do I fix this? Just observe. Act from that space. Now these aren't escapes. They're embodiment. You're fully in the experience, but as the one watching, not the one owned by it. So if we are one, every time you choose that observer gaze over reaction, you're shifting reality not just for you, but for all of us. The power isn't in avoiding the illusion, it's in waking up inside it. Like Buddha smiling through the spit. The quantum waves turning solid under your attention. As we learn to embody the observer, we move beyond simply understanding truth and begin living it. This is the bridge where awareness becomes experience and experience becomes transformation. In this space, spiritual mastery is no longer something distant or earned, but something remembered and embodied. And through that embodiment, ascension is no longer an idea. It becomes lived reality. We'll be talking more about these and other topics in future installments. And if there's anything that you would like for me to discuss or any questions you may have about anything that I have shared, please feel free to mention it by leaving a question or a comment in the comment section. As always, if you have found any of this information at all helpful or enlightening, please like, subscribe, and share with others. I truly appreciate those of you who are letting others know about all of this, and I continue to be excited at the growing number of souls awakening worldwide to this ongoing remembrance to a oneness consciousness. So as always, I send you my love. And if we are one, let's all live in peace, love, and joy.